Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And a little bit as expected, we are starting to get some news from CCP about their plans for EVE Online. First of all, pretty interesting one coming from nowhere for most players, I think, is that the CCP is introducing something called the Frigate Escape Bay into the battleships, which means that you'll be able to put a fitted frigate in your battleship, and when you lose the battleship, you'll actually basically find yourself in space in that frigate and you'll be able to continue the fight. Very interesting concept, and I personally can't wait to take a look at that on a CC. Hopefully there will be a mass test as well, because that does look like a feature that is decently new and complex. I wonder how they're gonna get all of that to work. Next up, we also have the return of the Yeet Fleet filaments, I guess we're gonna call them at some point. It is the random filaments that'll throw fleets of 5, 10 or 25 people, I think, into nullsec for some instant PvP and fun. Combine this with those battleships, of course, and you could be in for quite a little bit of fun. So that's interesting. A little bit as expected as well. They are producible by the players. Data sites, I think it's going to be wormhole data sites for drops, and then potentially CCP will also have some of them remain unique for some rewards and things like that. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And then of course the final bit of information is that we got the numbers for January. Economically speaking, I haven't looked into those just yet. I really should do that. Maybe I'll even make an extra video on it if I'm not inspired to do anything else. We'll see later on. First of all, here let's go take a look at the New Eden store to see what's happening here. So we've got some fireworks. Then we've got a new skin, the Heart Search skin. All right, you can understand where that comes from for Valentine's Day, of course. So very pink like skins, not exactly my favorite color, and especially for EVE Online, but alright. And I'm not spotting any real sales or anything like that. That means that we can move on to the market, and as always we are going to start with some plex and stuff, and that is going to be at 230. Alright, let's take a look at the plex chart. Still super flat, and today's daily average actually down just a little bit, right above the 3.25 million mark for the average prices. In GTA 4 sellers are going for just a little bit under 3.4 million ISK, buyers are above 3.2 million ISK, so that margin is really narrowing. And especially I think if we go for the player owned trade hubs, yeah, it's 3.363 million, so that's down just a little bit from GTA Station, but not that much anymore. And then we have the buyers that are up just a few thousand ISK as well, but really nothing too drastic. So that's a very big difference. In the last couple of weeks we had GTA going for a much higher price on the sell prices, and my thinking was that this would start an upwards movement for plex, but it looks like I was wrong. Basically that gap has been filled with new supply in GTA, and now GTA 4 and the player owned trade hubs are really close to each other at just below 3.4 million ISK, and buyers are just below 3.3 million, you could say. So very narrow margin here between these two at the current price. Some more wait and see, basically. We'll have to see what the future brings, and if CCP keeps, of course, throwing discounts at us, because I think that's part of the reason why we're still hesitating. If I'm not mistaken, I received another mail with like 25% off or 15% off for Omega time. So CCP is still influencing this market, although generally speaking here, I'm surprised at how long the hesitation is going for now. It's almost 3 months at bottom prices, at 1 year low prices for plex, you could say. Pretty interesting. Next up we have the multiple pilot train certificate that did jump up to around 1.6 billion ISK and is now flat there as well. Currently selling for, let's take a look at that, almost 1.7 billion for the sellers, and buyers are up to 1.6 billion in the player owned trade hubs. And here we do have a bit of a difference, because sellers in GTA are going for 1.75 billion. That is a serious jump up as well. So here we have that uptrend. I am seeing that upwards pressure pressure, especially considering these buyers going up to 1.6 billion, and it's just below that for JITA as well. And this despite the fact that the volumes have dropped off substantially in the multiple pilot train certificates. For the skill extractors next, we of course have a chart that mirrors Plex very closely, hesitating at close to a bottom price of a little bit above 380 million on the chart. We're talking 377 million for the player on trade hubs, 368 million for the buyers, again pretty narrow margin. And then in JITA we do go up to 389 million percentage wise, probably a little bit better than for Plex, which is also why we get a slightly more wavy chart than with Plex themselves. So here skill extractors, well, a slight indication that we should be going up. So here I do think that what has caused that stability to remain this flat for Plex is basically CCP doing some extra sales. After that we have our large scale injectors that are actually bouncing back down a little bit, landing on that 800 million mark. So in JITA we're selling them for 855 million, buyers are at 796, and then the sellers in the player on trade hubs are going down to 826 million. That is a pretty big difference all of a sudden. Basically you can still buy these for less than 800 million ISK. Sellers in the trade hubs go for 826, and then we double that margin again in JITA 4.4 to go up to 855. Should be another sign, in my opinion, of upward pressure, although at the moment it looks like people are strongly hesitating, and the buyers below 800 million ISK here can from time to time actually trigger a sale as well. If you look at these daily averages for yesterday and the day before that, so if you still want in on a large scale injector for less than 800 million ISK, in my opinion you can still do so. After that we have the small scale injectors that are currently going for less than 170 million ISK. Also some pressure at the tail end, 165 for the sellers. In JITA 157 for the buyers, and then do we have another in between like 160-ish? No, actually in player on trade hubs they're also going for 165. That's a different picture. Slightly narrower margin on the small scale injectors, and again a difference in behavior, you could say, in the small scale injector market compared to the large scale injector market. That leaves us with the daily alpha injectors that are finally going up from another 1 year high point. So here low point, excuse me, we have another sale from CCP, pretty obvious considering the volumes here. We touched on 30 million ISK, and that was an opportunity to buy them very cheaply. Of course we're back up to 43 million ISK for the buyers, and for the sellers, excuse me, and 38 million for the buyers. So here we're basically back on that 40 million range. And finally we get the hypercores that are flat just below 360, and very narrow margin between sellers and buyers here. Not much to say on that one. Let's move on to the mineral market. Oops, and I really shouldn't be hitting the microphone too often. That's coming in at 8 minutes. Let's go like that, and as always we'll start with titanium. That is back down a little bit on the sell price and basically stalls its increase at a 1 year high point of more than 7 ISK. It's let's take a look at it in the JITA station. 732 now for the sellers, 707 for the buyers. That is really surprising. Demand has been forced up to a price of above 7 ISK. Usually they can afford to wait and see a little bit longer, stay in that 6.5 range, put some downward pressure. This time though demand is strong enough, and I guess supply has been cut enough that buyers feel forced up to 7 ISK and more. 732 narrowing the margin. That's also kind of normal in my opinion. Quite a bit of dumping must be happening. Some people are trying to sell their titanium at the current price, causing more inflation, more supply, and thus stopping the increased price that was started so nicely. After that we've got pyrite that also has its jump up to almost 8 ISK apparently. 791 for the sellers, 737 for the buyers. Again, what we can see last 24 hours, that's like 10 billion units in 5 orders here. A little bit of dumping does happen, but buyers have been forced up to 737, and as a result this is a pretty strong performance now on a 1 year chart, practically double the price for pyrite. Who would have thought? I never would have risked buying down here, but turns out that we should have. After that we have the Mexlon chart, a little bit different, jumped up to 70 ISK and is actually landing back towards 60 on the chart. It's 65 for the sellers and 60 for the buyers. And of course there is a bit of a difference between Mexlon and let's say Pyrite, in the sense that Mexlon was still at its old price range. 60-65 ISK has always been really good actually for Mexlon, so here this pullback is actually kind of normal. For the Isogen chart, we also have a jump up. We are now selling these for almost 30 ISK. That's actually quite substantial. A bit of margin opening up though, 21 ISK for the buyers. And here might be a little bit of speculation from the sellers that Isogen might turn out to become actually a bigger winner for the resource change that CSP is planning for the game than first expected. Yeah, 30 ISK, that's up here for the current prices that sellers are trying to unload their Isogen at, unless someone is selling just to jump away. Yep, someone is definitely stalling the move here with selling at 22 ISK in the player owned trade hubs, and it's, well, it's not that big actually, like a dozen million units or so, compared to 140 million to 50 million here. That is quite a bit of a difference. So this is basically stalling our move up, but I think by next week we'll be there. After that we have the Noxium chart that also jumped up very clearly last week, of course, up to 450, 50% jump, not bad. 417, 418 now, so we give back a little bit of that ground, but buyers are up to 398 ISK. That does give us a much higher floor to work with. 400 to 450 seems to be the new range, quite respectable all of a sudden for Noxium. In the Zydrine market, we finally have a response as well. A little bit delayed last week. We did see us go back up, but not something that was feeling like it's completely out of the previous range. This does though above 600 ISK. We are talking 633 for the sellers and 585 for the buyers. Yeah, a substantial breakout for Zydrine has formed as well. And if you saw the ticker down below, Megasite is now also finally recovering, jumping up to the 450 range, 434 now for the sellers, 414 for the buyers. Not as good a jump as Zydrine that went to a 1-year high point, but it is a bit of a recovery as well for Megasite that was not doing too well. And finally we've got the Morphite chart that is also jumping to another 1-year high point. Eventually I guess the player base is expecting all of these to really be hit quite hard with shortages. 16,000 ISK for the sellers of Morphite, 15,000 for the buyers. Very pronounced 1-year high point. So yeah, it's been a very long time, but across the board minerals are up in price, and this value your mining is helping quite a little bit. And honestly, if I were to mine right now in Isaac, for instance, I would turn all of this into compressed ores and you know, bide my time, try to sell for the best possible price. After this we've got the PI market coming in at 12.55. Let's take a look at that. As always, we'll start off with the broadcast nodes that are now stabilizing below 2 million ISK. We're talking just below 2 million for the sellers and 1.9 million for the buyers. For our construction blocks, we've stabilized at 11,000. That's pretty good after the problematic and very weak fall period where we were lacking in demand. It looks like we're finally back to a normal range for our construction blocks. 11,700 ISK for the sellers and 11,000 for the buyers. Much healthier margin, showing that demand is back. We can also scroll down substantially more. Last 24 hours, a decent amount of buy orders. For construction blocks, you can really say that we are back in a healthier market. Consumer electronics was different last week, and it still is struggling, staying in the 10 to 11,000 range where it should be 12,500 ISK. So 11,000 for the sellers, 10,300 for the buyers. And look at the difference here on these buy prices. Despite the fact that there's some in the last 24 hours, honestly, you can't browse that much. So consumer electronics still well below average because of a lack of demand. On the coolants front, this is really a surprise because you can maybe see it from the ticker as well, but fuel is continuing to go down and down in price. Coolants, on the other hand, and those PI meters are doing quite well, staying at around 12,500 ISK here, 12,300 for the sellers, 11,400 for the buyers. Again, decently narrow margin, nothing to be worried about, and very good price for coolants, slightly below average. So pretty surprisingly strong despite what's happening to fuels. Cryoprotectant Solutions, another jump up to 200,000 discs this time. It's back down to 187 now for the sellers, but 168 to 169,000 discs for the buyers, almost 170. That is up here somewhere on the chart. Let's see if I can generate that. So buyers finally forced up substantially higher for Cryoprotectant Solutions. This could be something that'll take a little bit more time to fall back to a lower range here. So nice opportunity in these Cryoprotectant Solutions. Probably more implant stuff, of course. Enriched uranium is staying below 14,000 discs, but not by too much. 13,900 for the sellers, 12,500 for the buyers. Bit more margin than what we'd like to see. We're slightly below average, but still doing really well, considering that this is fuel related. Integrity response drones next. A little bit of jump up that we're recovering from right now. Went up to 2.5 million. We're still above that for the sellers and just below that for the buyers. So quite a strong performance all of a sudden for integrity response drones, able to stay around 2.5 million. Mechanical parts, finally the first one that is also breaking under the pressure. Tied to fuels, normal average price 11,500 disc. On a 1 year chart, I think 11k can definitely be seen as the average. 10,500 for the sellers and 9,600 for the buyers. Again here buyers, a little bit of a lack of demand, and so mechanical parts is actually pretty low, below average right now. Our organic mortar applicators are staying above $1 million this week. 1.1 million for the sellers, 1 million for the buyers. Yeah, not that much to say on this one. Our robotics was not doing well and is doing even worse now, heading for that 1 year low point. Honestly, 90,000 disc is not that great. 92,000 for the sellers and 88,000 for the first buyer, going down pretty quickly to the 85,000 range. So robotics under pressure and definitely trading well below average. For the self-harmonizing power cores, bit of a jump up to 2.4 here as well, recovering from that 2.3 almost for the sellers, but 2 million for the buyers. They are not budging, and you can probably grab them considering these average prices here. Our superconductors, which is something that I've been selling and producing myself, have recovered as well, after actually breaking out to 14,000 disc, pretty much on the sellers. We're still there, sellers at 14,000 disc, buyers at 11,500 disc. Nice comeback. Let's take a quick look at those buyers. It's not that much. There is some support at 11.5, but it's not that much. The margin is still pretty wide, so I would say try to take advantage of this if you have superconductors lying around, because we might go back down very quickly. Our test cultures next are going back down, so this one has known a very strong winter period of around 10,000 disc. Considering where we were last year, that was pretty good, but the pressure is on. 8,800 for the sellers, 8,300 for the buyers, back towards that 7,000 to 8,000 range, unfortunately, in my opinion. With where mainframes finally staying above average at around 2.3 million, I would say. Yep, just above that for the sellers, a bit above 2.1 million for the buyers. And here, that's the big difference, right? 2.3 million for the chart. That means it's going to be a lot trickier to grab with where mainframes at 2.1 million. Compare that to these self-harmonizing power cores where you have data points and a big crash back down to 2 million. And that's where the buyers are at. That's going to be easier to do. So keep that in mind. It's not always easy to grab advanced PI materials from the buyers. It depends a little bit on what's happening there. Next up, we have our advanced wound materials. They're coming in at 1830. There we go. As always, we'll start with the carbonite stuff. Alright, crystalline carbonite, another comeback, back up to 170 on a little bit of volatility. 165 for the sellers, 162 for the buyers. Look at that narrow margin, trading above average again, and so this ought to be tied to Galente production. Next up, we have the Fernite carbide that is continuing to not do well, staying below 130 on this one. 142 for the sellers, but 130 for the buyers. So you can see who's winning out here. here. If you want to grab Fernet Carbide very close to 130 ISK, it is the time to do so. On the Caldari front, Titanium Carbide is staying very flat and actually a little bit of pressure at the tail end, going below 175. 174 for the sellers, 170 for the buyers. This is much more stable though, despite the fact that we're trading at the lower range. Then we've got Tungsten Carbide that is, alright, moving up surprisingly, up to 200 ISK all of a sudden. 207 for the sellers and 196 for the buyers. A mark comeback. Pretty nice on the metamaterials fronts. Let's take a look at that. Photonic metamaterials. This is really surprising, and I actually made a move on this one. I bought, let's see if I can find them in the ticker, Photonic metamaterials for just below 15,000 ISK, because this is completely counter to what's happening here. Crystalline carbonate actually going up in price, seeing some volatility, and then the photonic metamaterials very flat at its low range, so I decided to buy these. You can still do that. Sellers 14,900, buyers 14,900. Most sellers actually at 15,000 ISK. So in my opinion, you can grab this for less than 15,000 ISK, and that will hopefully be something that will eventually be able to sell for maybe 20k or above 17.5. It would be pretty damn good, of course. Plasmonic metamaterials flat on its average, going for 21,400. You know, compare that to the photonic, that's not bad. 20,000 for the buyers, pretty good. Pretty good demand there. Non-linear metamaterials are also flat, well above 20k. 23,600 for the sellers, 22,000 for the buyers. Also decently strong demand, slightly below average you could say compared to first half of the year, but we're doing quite okay. And then finally we've got our terahertz metamaterials that are flat but below average, still above 20,000 though. 21,000 for the sellers and 20,000 for most buyers, I would say. So these are doing okay, a little bit below average. That leaves us to some of the other advanced MOO materials. Fermionic condensates flat below 90,000 ISK. Very stable at this point, and oh, alright, a little bit of a lack of supply. Let's see if the player on Trade Hubs is trying anything. Yeah, here Perimeter trying to sell below 90,000 ISK. Cheetah is trying to stay above that and not succeeding. The average price with a bit of pressure, upwards pressure at the tail end, is staying below 90k. Ferrogel is recovering from that December slump down to 35,000 ISK. We're up to 43,000 for the sellers, 40,000 for the buyers. Average price though should be above 45, so we still have a ways to go for that, but it's a bit of a recovery at least. Fullerite is now very flat, just above 1,000 ISK. 1,077 for the sellers, 964 numbers to say it's really lacking the volatility or the 1 year low point for an investment here. Hypersynaptic fibers, this is different. Pretty clear crash on increased volumes. That must be some dumping at least. Normal price 11,500 is pretty easily doable. 11,300 for the sellers, but 10,600 for the buyers. First buyer trying to grab that cheaper hypersynaptic fibers market. Makes a lot of sense in my opinion. This is a very clear and pronounced 1 year low point where you can buy as close to 10k as possible, although competition is pretty hard here. 10,600 already in the last couple of hours. So that's pretty aggressive. After that we get the nano transistors that is staying at around that 5,500 range. Yeah, for the sellers, 5,100 for the buyers. That's actually okay. Phenolic composites, very strong winter here as well, up to 2,100 pretty much on average. 2,100 almost still for the sellers and 2,000 for the buyers. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, 2,100, that's correct. I thought I was saying 21,000. So giving back a little bit of ground, but staying slightly above average, I would say. Finally, we got our ceramic fibers that are staying below average, but trying to stay at around 400 ISK. 398 for the sellers, 385 for the buyers. That's still okay and really not a 1 year low point or anything like that. So the one that's jumping out here is the hypersynaptic fibers, I think. Definitely a trend break, 1 year low point. If you want to make a move on anything, I would say that's your candidate this week. After that, we've got our Tech 2 ships coming in at 2340. Really? Jesus. I'm really going through this pretty quickly this morning. All right, let's keep going. Here is the Aries that is landing on 25 million ISK. We'll have to see where the buyers are at. 24 million for the first one, 23 for most. I'd say get rid of this one, try to buy for 23 million. That does make sense. Sellers are at 26, so a little bit of oversupply here. Clearly, this spike up to 35 million has been digested at this point, and you can try to buy some cheap Aries. Honestly, I would wait for 23 million to come into sight. After that, we've got the Basilisk that's also under pressure, down to 200 million, almost on the chart. It's 205 for the sellers, 190.5 for the buyers. We get a little bit to go, like maybe a dozen or so, and then we can go down to less than 190. I would still be patient with the Basilisk personally as well. Try to grab them as close as possible to a price below 190. 182, yeah, I'm not sure if that'll work, but I personally would wait for a better opportunity. The Cerberus, that's that second leg down here, another one that I can show you on the ticker. I bought one for 195, considering that I'd done 2 trades on these 2 increased prices as well, and bought for that range, and I succeeded. In the meantime, we're up to 222 for the sellers, 206 for the buyers. Not the best time to sell just yet, so I'll have a little bit more patience. But yeah, that's Cerberus. Double wave with an increased stop here, and I made a trade on both of them. That feels very rewarding, of course, and is part of the reason why I make Eve Talks. So that's a position that I made again. I've got another Cerberus bought for 195 that is ready to go. On the Crow front, very slow downturn, now going for less than 27.5 million, not yet at a 1-year low point, but it's less than 28 million for the sellers and 25.3 million for the buyers. That is pretty low on the buy side of things. You could consider a Crow if you really want that Tech 2 investment and to be ready for potentially another one of these spikes here. Although must be said that the latest spikes have not lasted very long and did not go so high. I prefer stuff like the Guardian or the Stealth Bomber. And ooh, Guardian? Is that a surprise jump up? We're talking 250 million for the sellers, 222 for the buyers. And do I have one of these? Guardian not in here? I'm pretty sure that I have one actually. Or is it already trying to sell? No. Trying to buy? No. Ticker. Okay, maybe I made trades made. Let's take a look at that on the Guardian. Oh, okay, I already pulled the trigger and too early here again. I bought one Guardian for 188 and sold it for 239 million. Well, with a little patience, it was the same story with the Cerberus trades as well. We could have tried to sell them now for around 250 million and made a bigger profit on that one. The Hawk, nice spike as well, up to 60 million ISK on a couple of days. We're recovering from that very quickly. The question is, will we overshoot? 30 million on the buys is really the low point. Well, 37 million for the sellers, 34 million for the buyers. You are below 35, which is below most of the chart, so you could consider it. I personally would again wait for a better opportunity. The Heretic is finally coming down in price after reaching 90 million. That should just mean a bit more supply, and that's exactly what's happening. In the last couple of days, we're down from 98 million to 74 million for the sellers. Buyers are actually up to 73 as well. Their patience eventually ended, but I personally think that now, considering a 299 sell order here, we are going to crash back down very quickly. And honestly, less than 25 a day, this is very difficult to actually make good trades in my opinion. The Hound here staying above 30 million. Pretty strong performance actually. 30 million for the sellers, 30 million for the buyers. But something to note, of course, 665 units in the second to latest sell order coming in here. That should start to put some pressure on the price. Perhaps we'll see another opportunity. And you guys know what I've been doing. Wait for us to be well below 25 million. Grab one for like 22 or something like that. Sell them back at 30. That has worked several times as well. The Ishtar surprise jump up to 250. I'm not sure where this demand is coming from. 243 for the sellers and 225 for the buyers. Very, very good price actually at the high range of this 1-year chart. On the Manticore market, we're actually going up as well to 35 million. Is this something that I'm still holding? No. Oh, it's something that I'm trying to buy. That's correct. 36 million for the sellers, 31 million for the buyers. If you bought at the right time for around 25 million or below that, you have a very nice sell opportunity. And for me, well, this is what I've been trying to do for a little bit. I was trying to sell a bit too aggressively at 24 million ISK. I think at 25 I would have grabbed them. But that's unfortunate. So this is going to be a missed opportunity. But yeah, Manticore, you can definitely sell them at a higher range right now. The Munin is landing on 230. There's not that much to say here in my opinion. 237 for the sellers, 212 for the buyers. That is pretty low. Another upswing. We could do well, but I don't like this chart. It's not spiky enough for those gambles in my opinion. The Nemesis is staying above 25 million on this one, 27 for the sellers, 24 for the buyers. Perhaps what's happening, we can see Manticore up, we can see Hound doing really well, Nemesis up slightly and definitely maintaining a good price, is that the announced change of the battleships with that extra frigate bay might push people to go into stealth bombers, because they might see these battleships make it back into the meta. And of course, you want to counter them. You know, first bombing run, take out the battleships, second bombing run, take out the frigates. It could be very potent, of course. It all depends a little bit on how your frigate ejects from the battleship. If it's standing still, you get a little bit of a problem. If it actually has some speed, then that could be it. That's what I'm suspecting. We'll have to see on CC, of course. For the Oneros next, actually going up in price as well, 218 for the sellers, 190 for the buyers. A little bit of a lack of supply in the Oneros market, but again, look at these volumes, that's kind of bad. And then we get a Purifier that is staying well above 30 million ISK as well. A little bit of pressure at the tail end, but still 35 million for the sellers, 29 for the buyers. Definitely not a place where you want to be buying at the moment. After that we get the Saber, and that's the exact opposite. So this is what I was fully expecting. The Heretic eventually will see some supply, bring that back down, and then the Saber eventually will stop seeing more supply. As we went down to less than 62.5 million, we're now going back up towards 66 pretty quickly, 59 million for the buyers. The Saber is now bottoming out, and fresh supply last 24 hours. Just one that is trying to dump a couple at 62 million, but then you can see much older orders, and I think this is going to be the recovery up towards that 68 million range. The Scimitar very flat above 200. That's not where we want to make our move. 196 for the buyers. I think we can go lower. And then finally the Zarmas, to take a look at some Triglavian action, continuing to go down in price, actually staying well below 300 million ISK, 295 for the sellers, 265 for the buyers. Well, it depends. Do you think that the Zarmast might make its way into the meta, replacing, I think it's armor, so replacing stuff like the Guardian, right? The Guardian is actually at a high point now, going for almost 250. Why not look into a Zarmast fleet for your logistics? It's a possibility. Then this would make a pretty good opportunity to buy some at less than 300 million ISK. In fact, you could go very close to like 275. I think it's gotta be possible. That's pretty low on this chart. 275, that's somewhere down here. But that is expecting the Zarmas to actually make it into a nullsec doctrine. Of course, that remains a little bit of a gamble. This is a newer ship, a newer race as well, a newer class of ships basically, if you look at the race. And so these have pressure just because those industry cycles are just finding their way and getting into rotation. So bit of a gamble, but you could take it. Actually, we don't have that many other options in the Tech 2 ship market, in my opinion, for this week. So it's a possibility. After that, we have our Tech 3 ships coming in at 32.40, let's say. Okay. As always, we'll start with the Confessor, one of the destroyers, and this one is jumping up to 45 million, actually jumped up to 55 on a day, and is already back down, so that's a bit of a surprise to me. It's still 43 million for the sellers, 36 million for the buyers. Don't I have some? Let's see down here. Confessor, I thought I had some. What are we trying to sell? Yeah, there we go. Trying to sell. Oh, I must have sold them then. Okay, a bit of a surprise. I'll have to look on my main if that has indeed triggered. But I bought Confessors for 27.5 million. You can see that's down here on the chart, so I really bought at this bottom range, and then I think I sold them now for 39 million on this increased price. That was, yeah, pretty damn good. Now 43 million for the sellers, 36.5 million for the buyers. First supply is coming in decently quickly, but look at that, 12, 10, and then all of that is sub 10. Not that much. The Confessor able to command a price well above 40 million at this point, and not being completely flooded is a very welcome surprise. And of course this 12 million, 11.5 million on a 27 million purchase is a pretty good trade right there. So Confessor paying off right here on a surprise spike, and the supply response is not that huge. Next up here we had the Hecate that is staying just above 40 million ISK here, 41 for the sellers, 37 for the buyers. This is bad, although these are older orders, 129, 178, 239. What's happening here? That is very weird. Something to keep in mind. Despite the fact that this is now going for less than the Confessor, we have a massive volume dump happening here in the Hecate market all of a sudden. After that we get a Jackdaw that's recovering from a spike up to 70 million ISK. Look at that volume. Must be Gnostic Doctrine related, of course. We are now selling these for still 68 million ISK, 47 million for the buyers, and this is what I would expect more of, right? Last 24 hours, look at that, practically 2 front pages. 20s and 10s, nothing too drastic, but definitely a lot of supply, which is normal because you've got such a massive premium for the Jackdaw right now. So this will give the rest of the markets a little bit of breathing room, like this Vapel should give it room to try to get back to 40. Almost doing so. 39 million for the sellers, 34 million for the buyers. But you can see here, last 24 hours, just 3 sell orders, all of them sub 10 in volumes, and then we can pretty quickly get our price up above 40 million ISK for the Zvepel. And here for the Confessor, apparently, yeah, bit of volume, bit of buying happening here as well, giving us room up above that 40 million range as well. The one real anomaly here, guys, super flat Hecate chart, hundreds of them in a couple of sell orders. That is something to keep in mind. But I think that basically the Jackdaw has bought us enough time with that high range of sell prices to get through this and still remain in a healthy destroyer market, not an oversupplied one. Right now, everything is gonna go to the Confessor and to the Jackdaw, in my opinion. If it lasts long enough, then that Hecate supply should dry up, and this Vapel should actually find itself above 40 million as well, and then we can just start to go back to those normal supply demand dynamics. After that, we've got our cruisers. The Legion is going up in price slightly, up to 160 million for the sellers, 149 for the buyers. Volume wise, a little bit more than in this slump here in August, September. And then a bottom in October, November, but nothing too special. I can't really explain why something like this is happening. Must be Gnostic. Honestly, a breakout like that must be low-key. Fleets going up to 300 million ISK almost. It's 290 for the sellers and 270 for the buyers. Well, that was an amazing opportunity, of course, to buy these for 150 in November. I never risked that. Another weird thing is, look at these volumes. I mean, it's just couple days of almost double. It's like maybe 50% more than on normal prices, and this is the impact here. A very weird situation. This could turn around very quickly, in my opinion, as Lokis will start to flood the market at this range. And then we get the Proteus that's just not moving, staying in a 130 to 150 range. Of course, the least popular Tech 3 destroyer, 149 million for the sellers, 137 for the buyers. Definitely trading below average, I would say. And finally, the Tengu, you may have seen that on the ticker, is actually going up in price as well, up above 180. 186 million for the sellers, 161 for the buyers. So here again, those November bottoms would have been pretty good on the Tengu and especially on the Loki. Let's take a look at the Legion as well. Yeah, not that great. And then the Proteus. Very weird stuff in the cruiser market, where this, let's take a look at the volumes here as well. Last 24 hours, nothing too special on the Tengu, on the Proteus, but they're still coming in despite being by far the worst Tech 3 destroyer in price. Then here we do have a more normal response, although look at this, is not normal. All these twos at exactly the same price. That is very weird in the last 24 hours. So here, this doesn't feel like regular supply dynamics. This feels more like market manipulation again. On the Loki supply wise, we've got half a page. Honestly, this was already by far the best selling one above 200 million ISK. Now it jumps up to 300 million ISK and supply is not responding. This again to me doesn't feel natural. Something must be happening there. And then on our Legion volumes, we've got nothing to... This is the only one that feels a little bit more normal, a slight push up on what's happening on the others. This one might actually be responding to market forces, but it's really the only one. All the others are showing, in my opinion, signs of really weird stuff happening. Alright, that means that we get to move to our extra product, and for this week it's gonna be Take 1 battleships. Let's take a look at that and see if there's been a response from that announcement of the frigate Escape Bay coming in at 3910. There we go. Take 1 standard battleships. Let's get started here with Amar. Here is the Abaddon, and look at that price. Average price 150 million is going up to 214 million, 170 for the buyers. And here you can see it's not really the volumes. So what I'm thinking that's happening here is basically this is being hit by a double whammy. First of all, the mineral changes, of course, mineral prices going up. Who tends to be the first movers on that? The bigger ships that take more minerals. And in high-sec, of course, those are the battleships. So the Abaddon was already going up in price. And now, of course, this is announcing that they're getting this extra functionality that you'll basically not just have a battleship, but a battleship plus a frigate for your PvP fights. That is going to entice people, I think, to use them. And thus we go up substantially all of a sudden, 230 million, where just a couple of weeks ago we were selling these for probably less than 150. For the Apocalypse, we've got a bit of a jump as well. This one actually feels timed more towards the mineral changes, going up from 100 and let's say 25 million up to 144. So it looks like this one is not too popular right now. And now we've got the Armageddon, which I really like for PvP. I think it's a very strong ship. Normal price, you could say below 150, and is currently selling for 182. That is not as big a change. So the Abaddon really the winner here. On the Amar front. Let's take a look at Kaldari then. We've got the Raven that jumps up substantially. 130 was definitely possible before all of this, and we are now selling these for 163. It's not even that big of a change, but it's some volatility that is very noticeable, and we also have a higher price, of course. For the Rock, maybe that's better for PvP. Well, no, not really. Pretty muted response. 172 for the sellers, 153 for the buyers. We're at the high range, but it's nothing too special. And then finally we get the Scorpion. That's up in price a little bit as well, but nothing too drastic. 148 for the sellers, 132 for the buyers. Next up here for Galente, we've got the Dominix. That one has had a spike as well, but is already recovering. Look at that, crushed very quickly. 160 million for the sellers, 146 for the buyers. That's nothing crazy, honestly. Hyperion next. That one is up a little bit, 150 average, maybe a little bit above that. Now selling for, no, 181. It's not completely out of line either. 162 for the sellers. And then the Megatron. That one, that is a difference all of a sudden. 130 before, and now all of a sudden 173 for the sellers. Substantially and very noticeable. 1 year high point all of a sudden. So I would say Megatron and Abaddon seem to be metas in nullsec, or potential metas in nullsec. Let's take a look at the Minmatar then. The Maelstrom, really nice as well. 130 up to 180 as well on the chart here. 175 now for the sellers, already going back down. The Tempest, I thought that was pretty good as well for PvP. Went up to 180, but look at that, 162 already being flooded very quickly. And then the Typhoon market next, slightly up to 180, definitely increases in value, but that was already happening here in the last couple of months. Very weird change here, and it's already at 167 for the seller. So I thought we'd see more of a response in the battleship market. There's really apparently a couple of outliers that are at very pronounced 1 year high points, like the Abaddon and like the Megatron. But other than that, well, yes, they have gone up in price. It would even be hard to say at this point if it's because of the mineral changes or because of the frigate bay that's being added to the battleship. So I'm surprised by that. There's some opportunity in here, but the way I'm reading this, for instance, for the Dominix, very clearly any higher prices. We went up to 190 on a couple of days, get squashed immediately, so people are absolutely 100% ready to plug these gaps in Tech 1 chip production, even for the larger and the harder to get to the market ships like the battleships. It is a very quick response, as you're really dependent on, I think, nullstick meta on battleships being used perhaps with the new filaments and things like that, in order to see which ones you should produce, and that'll be able to maintain that higher price. Anything PvE related, anything that doesn't know enough destruction and more demand, will just get right back to those, well, in my opinion, very cheap price ranges for Tech 1 battleships. And yeah, surprisingly enough, we're not really seeing that big of a response to the mineral changes in the battleship market at this point. Maybe volumes can explain that a little bit. Let's take a look at those just to finish off. Yeah, look at the Abaddon here. There's days where almost none of them are being traded. It's below 50 on practically every day. Apocalypse is even worse. Armageddon, whoops, excuse me, there we go. Armageddon, yeah, 25 on average. That is very bad, of course. Kaldari Raven, that's a little bit better, right? 100-ish. On most days, 75 on average, I would say. PvE platform, of course. Rock below 25. Scorpion, even worse. That's really bad. And I think Dominic's will do better. Yeah, 100-ish. PvE platform again. Hyperion below 50. Megatron, slightly better as well. Probably a PvP platform there. And some PvE uses. And then on the Minotaur, I'm expecting the worst. Yeah, Maelstrom, that's terrible. Tempest, 25-ish on average. And then Typhoon, 50-ish. And below that most of the year. So it's really because I think battleships are so out of the meta that we're not seeing that response to the change in mineral prices. And we are seeing some response to that announcement of the Frigates Bay, but it is really centered around some PvP focused battleships, I think, that will be able to maintain the premium. All the others already heading back down, unfortunately. And that's gonna be it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.